Three, two, one. This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends just like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover the Affordable Care Act is now unconstitutional. Republicans, you should be careful what you ask for. Was it a tweet? America's fastest growing game show. Investigations go viral and the shape of 2020. And of course, we'll end the show with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into it. The Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional. The Republicans, you should really be careful what you ask for. The GOP got its wish in a case brought by the Texas Attorney General, who is under indictment, by the way, and led by 20 GOP-led states. A federal judge just last night, Friday night, struck down the Affordable Care Act. In his ruling, Judge Reed O'Connor, an appointee of President George W. Bush, found that the law's an individual mandate is unconstitutional, and that because the mandate cannot be separated from the rest of the law is also invalid. The ruling is going to be appealed, and it's probably going to go back to the United States Supreme Court, who has two new conservative judges since the last time they ruled on it, Chris Bell.
Well, and that was the whole idea, to try to get it before the new court. But I think your point about be careful what you wish for is a very good one indeed, given the election that we just had, where about everything came down to health care, regardless of what district people were running in. And you haven't heard a whole lot of talk about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as the Republicans like to call it, since the midterm election, and for good reason, because they know they're on the wrong side of it now. And why they would want to keep it going, who knows? But they started the process, and I guess they can't stop it. And apparently the judge didn't get the memo.
The Affordable Care Act is polling higher than Congress and higher than the GOP.
For good reason, because Americans want health care. And I think it's not just an issue for Democrats, it's an issue for Republicans who support Trump as well. And I thought Trump's tweet was kind of funny because he says, "Get it done, Nancy and Chuck." Well, the Democrats have been trying to get it done. The Republicans have tried to tear it down. But here's the thing. This is what you need to know about this. Americans' health plans basically said this decision was misguided and wrong. We know that because it's going to deny coverage to 100 million people. I think this is grandstanding, Chris, because the ACA deadline is today, right?
Today, Saturday. We're taping on
Saturday, yeah. And so he did it for effect and grandstanding, and I think that the president is totally on this because this is the last battle he wanted to fight with the Democrats.
You talked about President Trump's tweets. Here's what he said. As I predicted all along, Obamacare has been struck down as an unconstitutional disaster. Now Congress must pass a strong law that provides great health care and protects pre-existing conditions, which it already did. Mitch and Nancy, get it done. The problem, Andy, is that we had a law in place that the general public liked and appreciated, and it was starting to work. It took several years for the law to start working. But I'm here to tell you, in my law firm, for the first time this year, our rates only went up 2%. And it was like a $25 a month increase this year for the first time. And it's because the law was finally catching up.
Well, I mean, I don't know what to add to that. I think that the Republicans sort of want the law to work, but don't want Obama to get credit for it. They want to figure out a way for themselves to get credit, but they don't want to pay for anything. But they want, the days of them being able to say, "Hey, let's get rid of this, and we're going to replace it with something better," have come. They had a chance to replace it with something better. They didn't have something better, and now they've wrecked the whole thing.
That is exactly right.
And it's so far away now from Obamacare that I don't even think that the Democrats are going to take the fall for it.
They can't take the fall for it, and you're exactly right. When the GOP had the chance to repeal and replace, which they've talked about for 8 years now, when they had full control of the government, they couldn't
come up
produce
with a decent, not one plan
No
that
plan.
was acceptable to anybody,
Yeah.
not even Trump.
And they had no plan.
That would fit within their criteria. And I realized this, I guess, going back to probably 2005 when I spoke before a bipartisan church gathering at not my church, but another one, and was talking about access to health care. And somebody finally interrupted me or raised his hand and said, well, you're not talking about access to health care. You're talking about access to health care insurance. And I said, well, there's just not a whole lot of difference in my way of thinking. But in their way of thinking, there was. And much of the Republican mindset is that if you can go to the emergency room or someplace like that in order to get your health care, then you have access to health care, even though that's going to cost everybody a fortune, including the taxpayers. But they didn't want anybody treading upon their insurance plan or creating greater access to insurance. And that's very encouraging. And I had to do it for my firm for the first time this year, Chris. And there's some affordable, it was frustrating, but there are some affordable plans out
Well, it's a difficult thing for small firms like
Very
ours.
much.
It's my biggest single expense is to provide health insurance for my employees. But here's what this ruling calls into question. And here's why the Republicans are scrambling right now, because they didn't want this to happen. 133 million Americans with pre-existing conditions could lose their coverage. 20 million Americans who rely on the ACA's consumer protection for health care. Insurers will no longer have to cover young adults up to the age of 26 on their parents' plans. Annual and lifetime limits on coverage will again be permitted. And there's no cap on out-of-pocket expenses.
if they were to do away with it.
If this ruling holds, all of that is now gone, and that's going to affect virtually everyone in America.
Well-
and the GOP is going to take the burden for that.
Yeah, so, yeah, they've given the Democrats more campaign fodder.
Right.
But I think you have two ironies working here. One, Obamacare was a Republican plan. He basically took
Mitt Romney's.
Mitt Romney's plan and made it, more universal. Two, the second irony is
don't talk about
if
Mitt
the
Romney like that.
Democrats had ran on health care as hard as they're trying to defend it now, maybe Obamacare would be in a different place, and it may not even be under attack like it is, but they ran away from it, and all of a sudden now they're embracing it, as well they should,
Right.
because I have a lazy millennial at home, and I'm probably going to have to pay the brother's insurance until he gets to 26.
I have a lazy millennial in the room.
and you probably going to have to keep him on your health. And so, it's interesting that now the Democrats are defending it with all their might, and when they had an opportunity to really galvanize around it, they just well, we can't say Obamacare.
I think we just lost the video.
Sure as hell cut off of me.
I don't know why.
All right, young Christopher, this is when you're unionized.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I just
Andy.
was going to say, good point.
What's the
Thank
effect? What's the effect here? Looking ahead to 2020, this has got to affect the 2020 race.
Okay, my question about that is the reason that the Republican voters support the Affordable Care Act, but they don't support Obamacare is because they don't have all the information, because they watch, just like the Democrats do, we watch our own shows and they watch their own, they get their news from their own sources. It depends on how Fox is going to spin this. So Fox has its work cut out for itself to spin
But
this in
but
such
what
a way
were they so
that
scared of, Andy?
But at
I
some
mean-
point, when your kid is dying and the emergency room is your
Or
only
you
outlet,
are.
you might start putting two and two together, despite what Fox News is telling you.
And that's what happened. And so, but what were they so afraid of? And that's
they were
what I've
afraid
never.
of a scary black president getting credit for doing something. I mean, for a wildly popular program, but it was going to cost some money, and it was going to be complicated, and it's hard to explain why we want to spend money on this, and transitions are hard, and it was a major transition.
Yes.
And so I think that the Obama White House did a good job of explaining. I think the Democrats were kind of chicken shit from running away from
Right.
it, scared of their own shadow. That's should be our party slogan. But with these younger, more progressive Democrats in office now, I think that they are not afraid of talking about universal health care. And I've always said, or for many years have said, let's get health care away from employers. Small business people shouldn't have to spend time that they could be spent building their business, working out what health plan their employees should
Well, and then,
get every
and then
year,
they
and
throw
they
out
pay.
socialized medicine and make that an evil term. But if you look at a lot of the places that have socialized medicine,
Working
not
out
such a
kinda
bad
well.
deal.
Well, Chris, to your point and your question about what does it mean for the election, what it means is the Democrats have to decide whether they're going to go with the progressive call for universal health care, or they're going to try to save Obamacare and fix it as it should have been in the first place. And the Republicans
Aren't they going to have to do both, though?
Well,
In the short run, they're going to have to save Obamacare, and then if they're going to go for the
well, they aren't going to do it in the next time they take office
Right.
because they don't have a Senate that's going to pass it. But what I'm saying, they're going to have to decide what the campaign's going to be.
Right.
Is it going to be Medicare for all, or is it going to be Obamacare? And so they have to make that decision. So it's going to be tough.
All right.
The Republicans don't have a message on that.
they're scrambling
So
right now. They're
I-
scrambling.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Was it a tweet? America's fastest
I love
growing
it.
game show. And now, listen. Here's where we are on was it a tweet? We have a tie in the studio. James Campbell and Andy Jordan are tied at 1 each.
Yep.
And Chris Bell is
Bringing up the
zero.
rear.
Zero.
He's bringing up
he
the
has
rear.
not won a game yet. So we'll see what happens this week. Here we go.
But the thing about it is, Chris
It's
thinks
black collusion.
I knew it. I was just about to say he thinks it's affirmative action.
Are y'all going to deny it? Are y'all going to deny the
Quotas.
collusion? It's the black collusion.
Okay,
That's
I didn't
right.
expect collusion. I thought,
Here we
You
go.
are colluding.
All right, here we go. The first tweet. Now, as you recall, these are all tweets by Donald Trump. It could be a real tweet, or it could be something that came out of my head. I made up. So, and Andy, you cannot look at my screen. All right, here we go. First tweet. I would make cloning legal if we could clone Justice Scalia.
that's
Tweet.
not a tweet.
Was a tweet.
That was not a tweet. I made that up.
Oh my God, I missed that. So Andrea 1, Chris and James 0.
Go ahead, Chris. What are you going to say?
Nothing.
I thought an F-bomb was coming out there. All right, here we go. Number 2. The statement put out yesterday by @Fox News was a disgrace to good broadcasting and journalism. Who would ever say something so nasty and dumb?
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
Not a tweet.
Tweet.
Oh yeah. Booyah.
All right. Chris is over. Man,
We
this
didn't have
is
any context.
You can
on
tell
that
how
one.
much time I spend reading Donald Trump's tweets.
All right, here we go. Number 3. I don't mind that at Barack Obama plays a lot of golf. I just wish he used it productively to make deals with Congress.
Not a tweet.
Yes, a treat. A
Tweet.
That was a tweet. There we go.
And
Someone
Chris
else is
Bell
writing
is
his
on
tweets.
the boat.
All right. Number 4. If Hillary Clinton played golf, she would be a real world leader. Sad.
Not a tweet.
Not a tweet.
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
Oh God, I fell for that one. Hook, line, and sinker.
All right, where are we
we're
at?
tied at 2.
Everybody's tied? Everybody's tied.
Everyone has two?
Yes.
Number 5. If the Democrats want to win Supreme Court and other court picks, don't obstruct and resist, but rather do it the good old-fashioned way, win elections.
Tweet.
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
tweet.
Oh,
All right, so we have a tie. Chris Bell is in the running for a win.
How many more?
We have a tie, one tiebreaker.
Okay, so is Campbell out?
Campbell's out. One tiebreaker.
I have 2.
Oh, yeah, but they have 3, don't they?
Yeah,
You're out.
But if I get it
You're out.
right,
You're out. The rules.
Oh,
are-
if you.
if I get it right on the
okay.
next one,
well,
I'll have
It's
it.
over,
He's
you're
run
out.
out of
I'm done.
questions.
You're out.
So,
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
out. It's over.
He made up the game. He makes up the rules. Let's
right.
go.
On the fly.
Here's the tiebreaker question. Certain Republicans who have lost to me would rather save face by fighting me than see the U.S. Supreme Court get the proper appointments. Sad.
Tweet.
Tweet. All right, we have a tie this week, so you both win beautiful prizes. What do they win, Chris Bell? What do y'all win?
Well, I'll be making Andy a nice Manhattan here shortly after we get off the air.
Brought to you by Yellow
All
Rose of
right.
Texas.
And I will drink it and say that it's yummy.
I
Even
want
if
to
it's
know,
not.
are we going to have some champipple on
Another-
Wednesday?
Wait, oh, you better believe it.
Okay.
You better believe it.
If you unionize.
All right, another version, another game of Was It a Tweet in the bag. All right, here we go. Moving on. Investigations go viral. It is a good thing Donald Trump is a billionaire because he's going to need every bit of it for all the investigations going on. His company is being investigated by the state of New York. His company is now being investigated by the Southern District of New York, the federal government, and that is, of course, by an appointee of Donald Trump. He's got the Mueller investigation going on. And Trump found out last week he has no real friends. Michael Cohen, his lawyer, pled guilty and flipped on him. David Pecker, the man with the most unfortunate name in America, and AMI and leader of AMI, cut a deal and flipped on Donald Trump. Maria Butina, the Russian spy, cut a deal. She flipped on Trump. So this is crazy. After all his talk for the last 2 years that no one should flip, everybody flipped.
I've encouraged my friend Colin Cox to try to get on David Pecker's legal team. I don't know if that's going to work out or not, but this has been quite the week. I didn't know that Michael Cohen could ever come off as a sympathetic character, but if you watch his interview with George Stephanopoulos, he really does.
Yeah.
He'd obviously been crying all night and has had it and is going to continue to speak out, and I think he's rather believable. And I think the music's playing. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, it's
absolutely.
It is coming
No
to an
doubt.
end. The aside from the Mueller investigation, this Southern District of New York investigations are the most intriguing to me. They're now investigating the inaugural committee for possible financial abuses relating to more than $100 million in donations raised by foreign governments, and that is highly illegal. And they announced that Ivanka Trump was involved in a scheme to charge the GOP $100,000 per room per night for the Trump Hotel during the inauguration.
So
Did
what,
they?
That's what they're claiming.
was that the Expedia rate or Travelocity?
It's our Travelocity. Can you imagine that? That's millions and millions of dollars they raked in from the GOP.
Wait, I didn't read that.
It just came out yesterday.
I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That so.
It's hard to keep up with all
it,
that.
it really it's a fire hose. But people paid that.
The GOP paid it. The party
room.
paid it.
Is that?
Yeah, but so the thing that's interesting to me is how Trump and his minions are trying to spin it,
Right.
and with the alternative facts, and Trump now saying this was about Melania. I'm talking about the payoff to the two women, and the thing that comes to my mind, if it's like the McDougal and Stormy Daniels, how many other women are out there? How much does Michael Cohen know that he hasn't revealed
Right.
yet? And I think that's the thing that's most intriguing. I think that's the thing that has Trump
But
most worried.
But his most interesting quote is also nothing would happen in that organization without being signed off on by Donald Trump.
But not
And
Donald Trump, Mr. Trump. And that's what gives it the credibility because he's still calling him Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
That's
I thought that was
That is
kind of
interesting.
interesting, too.
Yeah.
But I think that anybody that works for Donald Trump knows that he calls all the shots on everything. And so that means that, and some pundits have already tied him to the Russia meeting at Trump Tower,
Right.
and how he directed that, and not only directed it, but also encouraged
I don't think
it.
it's just the pundits tying him.
No.
Well, I mean,
I think the evidence is tying
Maria
him. and-
Butina is gonna
yeah,
tie
the
him to that.
witnesses are tying him.
And
but wait, the most intriguing thing is about other women who might come forward. That's the least intriguing to me.
me too.
I agree.
well,
Right? It's
That's just how
Everybody,
James thinks.
everybody knew
well,
he was sleeping
also
around.
you, but
well, I guess it wasn't the most intriguing thing.
but you still like to see these
But
women.
when you have a pecker like hiding all of this,
You just want photographs. Let me tell you why I'm convinced that the AMI payments to them was to influence the election.
Let's
It's
use good
because
grammar.
well, that's no
it's
doubt.
because
Let's not be
everyone
like Donald Trump.
everyone knew that he was sleeping around. That was already a part of the campaign.
Right.
We already knew that. So those payments that AMI made to them had to be to influence the election, as AMI, as David
Yes.
Pecker's now saying. There's no other reason to make the payments because we already knew he was
Right.
sleeping
And
around.
Cohen
but the-
explained it. He said
Yeah.
it was after the Billy Bush deal, and they knew if it came out when
Right.
at that particular time, it would
had
have been
to make it
incredibly
go away.
damaging.
But of course, they're making the argument that Edwards did the same thing. John Edwards did the same thing. He paid money to cover up the fact that he had
To
had
his
an
mistress.
affair.
Okay,
And
now
you know,
let me just. I'm sorry.
so
Go ahead.
I mean, so there's precedent for this.
But
And I
I'm with
think
you,
that
Andy. I don't think that's going to be the most
No.
significant
No.
thing.
I
I think
think
there's
that-
a lot of other things tying him to
I think
Russia
we're getting
and
I
everything.
think
The
we're
$100 million
getting distracted by this.
The $100 million collected by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and the Soviets, the Russian government. If that comes in, proves to be true, that they paid that to the inaugural committee, that's the biggest thing here. How much of this can the American public take before the American public says we have had enough of this?
but can't Trump and his family, except for Ivanka, claim plausible
Tiffany.
deniability on that?
Nobody's telling Tiffany
because,
anything.
Oh, I know Tiffany.
Tiffany
and
can.
And
Tiffany
Eric,
can.
Eric doesn't know a whole lot either. We like to let Eric know when we need to let him know. But they can claim plausible deniability on this one, I think. But it's interesting as a part of all the other investigations that are going on.
Well, my hope is that America can take 2 more years' worth, because the last thing I want to see is impeachment
That was
and
my
Mike
next
Pence
point.
get in there.
That was my next
so
point.
if we can just dribble this out a little bit longer and make it really build up to a big crescendo
Well,
in 2018, I would be just fine.
Nancy
I think-
Or
Pelosi,
2020. excuse
Nancy Pelosi's been saying, I think, all the right things because she is not talking impeachment. And what
Right.
the Democrats in the House need to do is do the investigations and never have an impeachment vote and let this president wither for the next 2 years. And he'll keep talking the way he is, and he's going to keep just stoking this fire and bring this to a crescendo where the Democrats can take control of the government in 2020. I think that's where it's headed.
Now, he will do a lot of damage between now and then, as we've discussed on this show previously, but I really worries me that Mike Pence could build some credibility and be a much better opponent
more
for any
effective.
Democrat.
Oh, see, now that's where I disagree. I used to be much more afraid of Mike Pence, but I don't. He has no charisma whatsoever.
After that
He's-
picture of him in the White House the other day when Trump was yelling at
Yeah.
at Pelosi and
Yeah.
Where he
Schumer,
just sat there like
he
a
just
statue.
sat there, like a
sat
stu-
there
yeah.
and looked like he had gas and he didn't know what
Yeah.
to do. I mean, that was the
No,
funniest
I don't,
picture
I don't
I've
think
ever
he's going to be a
seen.
great candidate. And if he got the nomination, I think that we would wipe the floor with him. I mean, Poe Thang, he is such a mess, and he's so
Yeah, but you've got to
he's
use
so
historical reference,
outside
Andy.
the
And if you look at how
mainstream.
Gerald Ford was able to make it a really close race with Jimmy Carter, he ended up losing. But Gerald Ford won any great shakes as a candidate, and it was damn close,
Well, Gerald
even in the wake of all
And-
that.
But here's my problem with impeachment is that if the House impeaches him, it's going to do the same thing with the Republicans that when the Republicans impeached Bill Clinton, it just energizes the Republicans because they see it only as a political move, and the Republicans are going to get pissed and they're going to get behind this president, and it's going to energize them.
I
And
don't think
we can't
impeach-
remove him, and so there's no reason to do it.
I agree, but I don't think impeachment's going to happen unless the investigations lead to that, and they may very well lead to impeachments, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's a non-starter.
Yeah, there's not
the
enough.
Democrats need to get in and get busy and do some work.
Yeah, agreed.
That's what they need to do.
Agreed. If he's not impeached and he serves out the rest of this term, I cannot imagine the Republicans making him their standard bearer for the next election. Because I think there are going to be a lot of Republicans who are going to jump in and feel like, well, I could do better than this guy. You know, if I cannot believe Donald Trump could win the primary. But when I was afraid of Pence was at the beginning of this administration, when it seemed like, okay, the Republicans have locked up the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate, they've got the executive branch, and they're going to work in this coordinated way to destroy our country. Well, they are such a bumbling bunch of idiots. They haven't gotten a single thing accomplished. It's just mayhem and chaos. And if you put Pence in front of that army, I don't think that's going to go anywhere.
That was back when you thought.
But another point back to impeachment, and you say you don't think it's going to happen, but it
Unless
could get
the investigations lead that.
Well, but
they're leading
given
that
what
way.
we're seeing right now and what we think Mueller might be coming out with, it may be a situation where the Democrats, given the base, can't not impeach because the cry will be too loud.
And I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that the state of New York indicts the president. I just don't. I don't think.
Well, that's
they've
another
got
question, though, Chris. You're talking about the Southern District of New York.
No, the state of New York, not the Southern District. The state of New York,
Okay.
which he doesn't have any protection from. And if that happens, those cries that Chris Bell's talking about could get pretty serious.
But sometimes
so-
it goes
but you
back
know-
to what Rudy Giuliani said a long time ago. Sometimes the truth is just not the truth, Chris.
That's
And
right.
so you can't lose sight of
But
that.
but I still don't think unless the Senate Republicans stand up and say we will remove this president, the House has no business taking up articles of impeachment. It just doesn't go anywhere. It
Right.
bogs the government down. It energizes the Republicans, and it doesn't help the cause.
Right. And, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is, now in January, we'll have a divided government, okay? We'll have the House in control, and they have to figure out how to do governing again because we're headed towards a crisis. We may be headed towards a recession. And things are going to get bad, and they're going to have to come together at some point to actually govern for the American people.
And I think that is what the cry from the base is going to be. There's not going to be any cry from the base for impeachment if people are losing their jobs and the stock market is crashing and people's retirement funds aren't worth anything. Number two, there's not going to be any cry from the base for impeachment if the House is crafting legislation that actually would positively impact people's lives. And that's what we need to be focusing on,
Yeah.
not
Andy,
the political ramifications of impeach, don't impeach. Do a good job. Let's not waste our time on the impeachment is a political tactic at this point because you don't have a Senate that's going to convict.
But if our friend Evan was here, he'd be crawling 8 feet up our asses right now, talking about
Not
what
mine.
big pussies we are,
And he would be
how
wrong.
We
he would be
absolutely.
wrong.
But he's part of the base, and he's part of the very vocal base, and I think speaks very well for him. And I think there's going to be a very loud cry to take action if this investigation goes where we think it's going.
And I don't want to compare. No, I'm not going to make that analogy. But you can have a lot of shouting and yelling and crying, but sometimes you need to ignore the noise and get the business done. And it's not like there's nothing that needs to be done around here. I mean, we just spent however many minutes talking about health care. If the Democrats want to lead, then take this opportunity to get some stuff done. And if you put good bills, you pass good legislation, and the Senate doesn't go along, the Senate Democrats are on board, and you've tried to work across and come up with, and then the Republicans shoot it down, That is your platform, not we impeached an idiot.
All right, let's move on. The shape of 2020, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Julian Castro moved one step closer to the 2020 presidential run, launching an exploratory committee and saying he'd make a formal announcement in January. And when you announce an exploratory committee, it's really, you're going to do it. I mean, I've never seen anybody announce an exploratory
Well, it's going
committee.
to last about a week.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody announce an exploratory committee and then come back out later and say, I've decided not to do it.
Everybody told me this was a stupid idea.
Quoting his mother, Castro said, if you want to make change in your life and in your community, you don't wait. You work. You make future happen. She said that to us, referring to himself and his brother, Representative Joaquin Castro, Democrat of Texas. So we did, Chris Bell. That's what he said.
Well,
And I know this is your favorite guy.
no, Julian's fine. I just think it's really interesting, this sort of quest for relevancy in the wake of Beto O'Rourke. And he goes on the Colbert Show just like Beto O'Rourke did, but the difference being when Beto O'Rourke went on the Colbert Show, it was one of the more compelling television performances I've seen in probably the last 5 years. It was a great interview. He sort of introduced himself to the country, and I think the country saw this very authentic individual. What they saw with the Castro brothers are these two very highly programmed politicians come out without a great deal of humor or authenticity or anything else, and the brother saying, yeah, he's going to run. And it just doesn't seem to be catching fire with much of anyone. A year or so ago, I think he was somewhat of a hot prospect. I think that's faded.
And last week we were talking about when it's your time run, and has his time passed?
Well, not really. I mean, he never
His
really
time
had
for
a time.
this election, for this office, has passed. I think that he's still a viable candidate for some other office.
Yeah,
he's not something that we should just throw away and forget about.
Yeah, so I think the Democrats are really in a good place now because they have all these attractive candidates who are younger and have some really good ideas. The Castro brothers have a wonderful story. I think they will be attractive candidates for governor of Texas or John Cornyn's seat or Ted Cruz. But, you know, the Democrats basically, when it comes time for the primary, will have a question. Do we go backwards with a Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, or even Hillary Clinton, or do we go forward with a Beto O'Rourke and a Julian Castro and other, candidates? Hickenlooper is his name.
Right.
Nobody named Hickenlooper will ever be the president of this country.
No one named Trump will ever be the
Hickenlooper?
president of the. I mean,
Right.
we just put all that to rest.
Yeah, but they
Hickenlooper's
have
a good guy.
But it's not a
Right
good
guy.
name.
Yeah, but they
Well,
have.
let's-
You
I
can't
mean-
even put that on a bumper sticker. It's too long.
But
They
they
be a
have.
very long bumper sticker for like the High School of Performing Arts. It'll go all across.
I don't feel like our analysis is very deep.
Yeah, but I like to finish my point.
Please
Please
do.
Oh,
And
it's taking too long, but go ahead.
We thought you
Like
finished a long time
Hickenlooper's
ago.
name. I'm done.
Go ahead. No, come on.
I'm done.
Go ahead.
Please.
So when Andy and I were at Tribune Fest, I ran into a guy who was doing a documentary when I was running for governor during 2006, and one of the guys who assisted him on that documentary was there, and he says, you had a quote back then that I still keep on my wall, and I didn't know what he was talking about, and he says, you said fortune favors the bold. And I said, well, I don't know where I stole that, but I'm glad you like it. But anyway, but if you think about that, I think it's very true. And Julian Castro was not in office, could have run for governor this time. Joaquin Castro could have given up his seat in Congress and run for the Senate seat against Ted Cruz, but neither one of them would pick either of those races because governor was going to be very tough, and obviously the Senate race was going to be very tough. And so you take your pass and somebody else moves into that bright, shining spotlight and does a hell of a job and really changes the state. And I think, going back to what you were saying, you have to take your chance when it comes. Well, I think that was a great opportunity for them. And that's one of my complaints about the Castro brothers. It always has to be pretty easy picking. It has to be really low down on the tree for them to want to grab the fruit. And if it's going to be really tough,
They
don't
pass.
really.
So you
they're
think
not willing to do
running
it.
for president or announcing for a primary that you're going to run is easy?
No, I think
Giving
he's
up
saying
nothing
that
to do it.
that it's a hard. He's got a very low chance And so he doesn't want to do anything that he's not sure he can win. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Well,
and
it's
that's the feeling that I got at the Tribune Fest a year or two before this most recent one, where he was on the fence about running for governor, and and then and he said in consultation with his family, no, this was not the right time. Well, you know what, bruh, it was the right time. Either and you should have done it then, that or some other office, because he was hot right.
Well, think
right
about
then,
the complexion
and
of
he's
that
not
statewide
now.
race. If Julian was running for governor instead of Lupe Valdez, who everybody dismissed or very early
He'd
on,
have won.
and so he's at the top of the ticket along with Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty incredible.
That would have been pretty
they'd
incredible. And
they'd
that-
have both won.
Right,
they
and
may have
he
both
would have been
won.
able to raise a ton of money,
Right.
and I think it maybe could have
Right.
made up that 200,000 vote difference.
I think,
So-
but
so
what
he-
Chris was
he
saying
was not
was,
bold.
instead of taking on
Right.
a very
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
challenge,
yeah, I
he
got
passed
it.
on that.
It'd be
Yeah.
a hard race. I mean, it's not it's not easy. Yeah, right.
Well, it's not easy running for president, but what do you give up? I mean, governor's a little bit of a different deal because it's just tough. If you lose, people immediately attack you and what have you. And he didn't want to. If you run for something like president and lose, well, hell, I mean, there are countless people who've run for president and lose, and it doesn't really
He was working
count you
on-
out of anything.
He was working under an old school formula where, like, sort of the Hillary Clinton, it's my turn.
Right.
And he did not think it was his turn. His turn was going to be a different turn, but we don't take turns anymore.
So before we close this out, his biggest challenger right now, of course, is Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke was asked about it. He said, "My political future won't be dictated by a fellow Democrat, Julian Castro's decision to seriously consider a run for the White House. I think it's something positive for the United States that he can offer and share ideas."
Well, and I thought it was really interesting when we had Michael Watts on, a major funder in the Democratic Party, a couple of weeks ago, and we asked him about Julian Castro, and he said if Beto O'Rourke gets in, it greatly diminishes Julian Castro's chances, and I don't think there's really any doubt about that.
Well, they're cutting up the same voters.
Yeah,
Well,
I
and-
agree.
yeah.
I don't have a disagreement with that at all.
But I also don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Beto is going to be the nominee, and
Oh,
that's
I don't
and that's a
either.
good thing. I mean, for once, or not in a long time, have the Democrats had such a great selection of potential potential
Primary
nominees.
candidate, yeah.
Well, and it'd be the first time in a long time that we've elected a nominee without the superdelegates, and it's going to be a really sea change
that'd be
in Democratic politics to see it without having the superdelegates really dictate who it's going to be.
And thank God it will come down to those two very diverse states, Iowa and New Hampshire, to decide who's going to be the front runner for it.
And men and women, and black people and white people and Hispanic. I mean, we have a really good. I mean, we don't know how many or who all is going to run, but if everyone who sort of acts like they're going to runs, I think there's going to be a lot of good choice.
All right, let's move into out of left field. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first. We all talk about technology and how it's hard to keep up with it and how it can sort of make our lives more difficult because when we think that we're on top of it, something new comes along and we have to learn that, or we become so dependent on our phone or our computer for work and our everyday lives. But then every now and then you have a week like this week, and something because of technology happens and you think, man, that really is an incredibly positive change. I ordered a picture frame and it came and it was cracked. And I read the very easy instructions on Amazon.com and they just said, pack it back up, sent me a code, said, take this code to the UPS store. I went to the UPS store, and I'm serious, y'all. It took me all of 2 minutes for them to scan that, print out a label, take my package, and say, thanks for coming by. And I thought, this could have been the most incredible pain in the ass a few years ago. So sometimes technology really does make our lives a whole hell of a lot better.
I'm glad you discovered scanning machines. You have made it into the 21st century, brother.
Oh, I do self-checkout, mister.
well, you and Daddy Bush.
Of course, he's standing there at the self-checkout going, help me, lady.
Can you come over here for just a moment?
So my out of left field has to do with how Donald Trump is keeping a promise of draining the swamp in Washington, and he's starting with his own administration. He's up to, I think, over more than 37 people now, and he continues to drain. But the drain that was most intriguing to me was Rex Tillerson, his former Secretary of State. And when we were debating whether or not Tillerson actually called him freaking
moron. Freaking.
Yeah.
Freaking.
Well, I'm trying to be good to my parents
clean
in
up.
case they watch this.
Nice. Yeah.
But, we were debating that. Is it any doubt now that he called him a fucking moron? Was it any doubt?
Yeah.
Because he said in a speech a couple of weeks ago in Houston that he was trying to keep him from breaking the law. And he didn't want to say, we can't do this, Mr. President, because you would be breaking the law. And he went back to his office and he said to his, executive assistant, I'm trying to tell that fucking moron that he can't do this because he will break the law. So that's my out of left field. President, Mr. President, you've kept your promise. You continue to drain that swamp.
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Campbell, he almost made it.
That's so funny that you brought up Amazon and how easy it is to return. And I love shopping on Amazon and Zappos. And I feel like there was this Chinese restaurant that my husband and I used to joke about, that they just had all the soups and the rice and everything in the back of somebody's trunk, because it seems like you'd call in your order and 5 minutes later, here it comes. Like you just... You think somebody must just be riding around with different food in the car. Well, that's how Zappos feels sometimes. You order a pair of shoes and it's in the morning and they are literally there in the evening. The thing about it is, you get to the point where you feel like you can't live without that. And Christmas presents, last minute, you don't have to go anywhere. Just type it in and boop, there it is. It's on your front porch. But what the New York Times and other reporting has shown is the human toll that kind of turnaround requires.
Sweatshop.
We have American sweatshops, literally. I mean, people who are working in warehouses that reach 120 degrees because Bezos is too cheap to put in some air conditioning. They have, there are warehouses where they have ambulances on standby, like it's a professional football game. They just understand that people are going to fall out and need medical care, but they just take them out on a stretcher and keep that assembly line moving.
And they can't even take a restroom break.
They can't take a restroom break. People...
well, in my defense, the guy in the UPS store, it was climate controlled. He seemed very, very comfortable.
Look, I use these services, but there must be a way to for workers to get paid well, work under reasonable conditions.
It's called unions.
And it is called unions, but you can't unionize a robot shop. So once the jobs are completely taken over by robots, we need to figure out, and I don't care what climate they work in, but we've got the problem today of harsh working conditions, and the problem tomorrow where even those poorly paid, terrible jobs go away, and Democrats, get on it.
Yeah.
All right, my out of left field, it's Christmas season, and that means it's time for my annual one-time trip to the shopping mall to buy the two gifts I have to buy for Christmas, one for my wife and one for my secretary, because I let my wife do the rest of it. So I have to go to the mall, buy those two gifts, and it takes me about 30 minutes because I hate the mall. And then I go, but I don't want my wife to know that it only took me 30 minutes. So after I buy the gifts, I go to the local watering hole and drink a couple of beers and watch a football game. And then I go home and sit on the couch, and I get one of my daughters to wrap the gifts, and I sit on the couch and bitch about how much trouble it was to go to the damn mall and how crowded it was. And that is shopping for Christmas. And I know I'm not alone in this, men. You don't have to say it out loud like I just did, but Merry Christmas.
Well, I used to really shop at the mall, and one time I took my dad before he passed away, and finally he said, "Can we sit down? I haven't shopped this goddamn much in 20 years."
That's all the time we have this week. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, we need you to do what, Andy?
Subscribe.
It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment for putting us on YouTube every week, and Keegan DeLego, our in-studio producer. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.